Okay, thank you for coming to the video. So what I want to do is assess how EFS lenses work and perform on crop sensor cameras such as the 90D, 7D Mark II, 70D, 80D and so on. So it's a crop sensor body with a crop aspect ratio of 1.6. We're having a look at the Canon EFS 18 to 155mm EFS lens. It has an aperture of 3.5 to 5.6. I think it's rated at 4 stops image stabilization. This is not the kit lens though that you would typically get. This is one of the higher grade kit lenses you can buy, ranging in price for around between £350 and £450 brand new. So I want to address two images that we've got at two different focal lengths, same image, sorry. This is a lens sharpness test chart that we've got, and I just want to zoom in straight away into the image in the corner to determine sharpness. So just bear with me while I do that. We want to go to 100% at the 4 different apertures of which we're going to be choosing, which is 5.6, f8, f16 and f22. So this is the 5.6 image. Obviously in the corner it's going to be a little bit softer, that's to be expected with most lenses these days. But it's rendering good detail, good sharpness across the frame, and I am happy with that. Let's have a look at f8. We are getting an increased amount of sharpness, especially in the corner, and especially around the number 1 here. I can see more detail, more of a pattern. You can see the crisscross pattern on the squares, and we are getting good detail. Let's have a look at f16. F16 again seems really good detail. I do think it's maybe not quite as sharp as it was at f8, but it is rendering good detail. Let's have a look at f22. While we can still see some of the detail here, it has gained some softness, so it does appear some diffraction is rearing its head here, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was on an EF lens, a full frame lens. So what we can determine here is when we put an EFS lens on a crop sensor body, we get great results. But when we put an EF lens on a crop sensor body, we get diffraction coming into the image at around f16. So if you want to have great results from your smallest aperture up to your maximum aperture like f22 or maybe f32, it's best to use a crop sensor lens or one of the DC Sigma lenses or the EFS lenses to get the best results out of your camera. I'm not saying you can't use full frame lenses, but you need to be mindful of these issues when you do use them. So first of all, let's move over to 5.6. I want to have a look at more patterns so you can get more of a comparison. It's always a good idea to have a look at multiple parts of the frame, so then you can get an idea of the results you will achieve. So let's just have a look at 5.6. Good detail. You can see the pattern and the grain, and it looks nice. So let's have a look at f8. I believe there's a slight improvement in detail there, not a vast amount of improvement, but it looks good. So let's have a look at f16. F16, we seem to have lost a little bit of sharpness, but it's still rendering a lot of the detail that was there at f8. It's just not quite as sharp. So let's have a look at f22. We're getting some blurriness coming in here, so obviously diffraction is affecting the image at a significant amount of diffraction is affecting it f22, but we can still make the pattern out. We could not make the pattern out when we put a full frame lens on and we set the aperture to f22. So let's have a look in more of the center part of the image again, so we can have a look at sharpness. It is a good lens this, and I certainly would recommend it. So let's just have a look at 5.6. We're getting some good detail there. If you're wondering what these hairs are, it's just dust particles, and it looks really nice. Let's have a look at F8. There is a slight improvement in quality. I don't think there's an issue there. Make your own mind up whether you like it or not. Let's have a look at F16. I think we've lost a tiny bit of sharpness here because it's not quite as sharp as it was. Let's have a look at F22. Again, I think we lost a bit more sharpness here, but it's still rendering a good detail at these apertures. So let's have a look at another image, which is the test chart image. We've zoomed in a bit more, 135mm on this EFS lens. So again, let's zoom in into the corner so we can have a look at more detail. This time I will go into 200%. Let's do the same at F8, 200%. So you can see it might be more visible on the video. I know sometimes it's not as crystal clear as it needs to be. So it's maybe better for me to zoom into 200% so you guys can actually see it better. So there you go. So this is 5.6. Obviously it's not as sharp as it could be, but it is still rendering good detail. You can see that pattern is rendered very well, and you can see it around the number 1 there. So let's have a look at F8. We can see some slight improvement in image quality there, and it just looks more vivid. Contrast looks a tiny bit better, and is showing all the detail that we need to see at F8. So let's have a look at F16. Again, it looks reasonably nice. I think maybe it's a tiny bit softer than it was at F8. Let's just go back to F8 and compare that. F8, F16. It's very close. I can't really tell the difference at F8 and F16. So I would say sharpness is probably either the same or a tiny bit tad worse. But that's all you can really make out here. Let's have a look at F22. Now at F22 I think we've lost a tiny bit of sharpness there. Because I think diffraction is starting to affect the image. But it's important to note that at F16 we had extreme softness when we used our EF lens, the 150-600 contemporary lens, while I had good detail on my full frame camera on my EOS R. I lost a lot of detail at F16, and then when I put it to F22 I lost all detail. It was completely gone. All you could see was a complete greyness all the way around this number 1. But here you can see the pattern is well rendered. So what we're seeing here is that when we put an EFS lens on a crop sensor body, it's designed for crop sensor cameras. So it retains the detail. But when you do the same with an EF lens, that's a full frame lens, you lose a lot of detail because diffraction starts affecting your image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my video that I recently did onto the end of this video so you guys can watch that and see the comparison of full frame versus APS-C cameras and how diffraction affects APS-C when you start stopping an EF lens down. But what I'm finding out is if you use an EFS lens on an EFS body, such as the 90D, the 7D Mark II, 80D, 70D, you're going to get better results than you are if you stick an EF full frame lens on your camera. I hope this was helpful. My advice would be, if you're going to use a full frame lens, don't try stopping it down below f8. If you're going to use an EFS lens, obviously you will be able to go much lower than f8 and get good detail. Hope this video was informative. Hope it helped you out to understand the effects of diffraction. If you're wondering what diffraction is, it's when you try stopping your lens down too much and it starts softening your image up. So you can only stop your lens down so much before diffraction affects your images. You may not see this in the real world. Clearly this is a test chart. We are zooming in, we are pixel peeping. I hope this helped you out. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video if it did inform you about diffraction. you know, as I said, I'll put my other video on the end of this so you can see that one as well. Just, you know, you just need to finish watching the credits and then you'll be able to watch that as well. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Hello, welcome to a new video. So we've taken some test images on the lens sharpness test card using the 90D APS-C 32 megapixel sensor, right? And in my previous video I talked about diffraction coming into your image. Now here we've got 4 images. So this image is at f6.3, then we've got f8, then we've got f16 and f22. So let's just zoom all these images in up to 100% on each one. I like to go in the far corner. That tends to be where the lenses are sort of at their weakest. So it does show how well it performs when we start having a look at these images in closer detail. And what we're looking for is a pattern detail in these boxes. Is it well defined? Is it giving us a good readout on the pattern? Is it crisscrossed in the boxes? And that tells us how sharp the results are from the camera, as well as how much detail the lens is obviously rendering. Now, as I said in the previous video, that APS-C is quite tough on full frame lenses. They literally you know, max out the lens to the maximum in terms of how much resolution it can achieve. And you may find that some older EF lenses may not be up to the task because they were never designed to be able to render the detail that they're expected to render out of these high megapixel cameras. So at f6.3 we're seeing some good detail here in the corner, and we can see a pattern is crisscrossed. It's not absolutely perfectly sharp here. Now obviously I did a previous video where I said f8 it sort of you know, I had a reduction in image quality. I would say that the test that I did must have been flawed somehow, because I do have some improvement, not a lot but some. So, but first of all, we're looking at this image, which is f6.3. Now as you can see, it's rendering good detail. In all of these 3 grey boxes here, we're seeing the pattern crisscrossed, and it's reasonably good. Now if we look at f8, we have a slight improvement in quality. What I have noticed is around the number 1 here, we can see some pattern around it, which indicates that we are getting a slightly bit more detail, contrary to what I did in my other video. You know, we all make mistakes when we do our tests, and sometimes something was not quite right when I did the previous tests. So it's always a good idea to rerun your tests and have a look at your results. So if we just go back to f6.3, we can see it's a bit more blurred around the number 1 here in the corner, and back at the f8 image it's a bit more defined, the pattern around the number 1 there. So we are seeing some slightly better detail at f8 versus 6.3 that we've got here. So what I want to do is have a look at how the image performs at f16. So let's just have a look. Now looking at f16, I can clearly see diffraction is taking effect here, because if we just go back to our f8 image, it looks clearer. At f16 it gets softer. So diffraction is affecting the quality of the image. And if you don't know what diffraction is, because if this is the first time you've come to one of my videos, welcome to the channel obviously. Subscribe and like the video if it helps you out obviously. Diffraction is when you start stopping the aperture down and you're not getting any more improvements, and it has an effect of softening the image. So stopping your lens down isn't always a given that it will give you improved image quality. So looking at the image here, at F16 diffraction is affecting our image. We are getting softness. I will look in the center for you guys if you want to have another look at that in a moment. I just want to compare the different apertures. So F22, let's have a look at that. Now we've lost all information and pattern in these boxes completely. I can barely make out any sort of pattern at all. So, you know, that's the contrast from going from f6.3, which is reasonably sharp. We get minor improvement at f8. At f16 we get softness, and at f22 it blows out completely and we have softness for definite. So let's just go back to the beginning so you can see it in quick succession. f6.3, f8, f16, and last of all f22. So that's what we're getting out of the 90-day, but for the sake of it I would like to go into the pattern area here, which is more in the center. Do the same for f8. Now the pattern is actually crisscrossed in these circles, but you'll certainly be able to see more of a blurred out result in these apertures. So looking at f6.3, we're getting some good detail in the pattern. You can see the pattern there, and it is rendering the result quite well. So let's have a look at f8, where we have some slight improvement. Not dramatic, but some slight. And then we'll have a look at f16, where I can barely make any pattern out at all. Looks very blurry. So clearly diffraction is affecting our image here, and we do have softness. Many people have said, well, professional photographers use these cameras and they don't suffer from diffraction. You don't see that in the real world. You don't pixel peep like this in the real world. So they may not notice it at all. You know, we're pixel peeping here. We're looking at test charts. We're zooming in at 100%. You know, we're looking at the pixels. We're checking the contrast and the image depth and, you know, the pattern detail. These are things that the professional photographers don't really spend a lot of time on. But I do like to do lens tests to find out how sharp a lens can be, and how does APS-C and full frame work on those camera lenses. So let's just have a look at f22 again, and there's no pattern at all. So I'll go back to f16. There is a tiny bit of pattern, but it's blurred out. At f8 we have some good detail on the pattern, and at f6.3 it's not quite as sharp at f8 than it is at f8. So obviously, rerunning these tests, we found out that at f6.3 it's reasonably good. f8, stopping it down by one stop, gives us some improvement on image quality, but then when we go to f16 we start to lose it, and then at f22 completely lose it. So let's just go back to f6.3 and let's have a look at the center. This is the center here. Let's go back to f8, see how that's rendering. If you're wondering, there's little hairs actually on the test card. Go to f16 and f22. So I'll just go back to f6.3. Obviously it's rendering reasonably good detail. Those hairs are not completely sharp, so this is why I've always said prime lenses are definitely better than zoom lenses. You get more detail out of a prime. Let's just have a look at f8, see how that is. It's sharper. I won't say it's tack sharp. Those hairs are more obvious in the center here than they are at f6.3. Let's have a look at f16. I would say f16 is not quite as sharp as it was on F8. So here is where diffraction is affecting our image. And let's have a look at F22. Again, it's quite soft there as well. So I just hope this little video cleared it up regarding my previous test when I talk about diffraction does affect APS-C, especially on full frame lenses. I've always said that a EFS lens, or you know, I know Sigma do their own variant, works better on crop sensor cameras than using full frame lenses on APS-C cameras. So I just wanted to show you this. So without further ado, let's jump over to the 20 megapixel 7D Mark II. I thought it'd be important to have a look at that, and you can see the difference there. So I've done another test on the 7D Mark II, just so I've got, you know, something else to form a conclusion from. So as I've mentioned, you know, APS-C does seem susceptible to diffraction quite a bit. So we're on the Sigma Contemporary lens again, but I just want to zoom in to the corner again on the aperture of 6.3. So let's just zoom in there. Let's go right in there to 100%. Let's do the same for F8. This is F8 image. Just want to get there so we can show the differences. Now, this is a 20 megapixel camera instead of the 32 that like on the 90D, but it should show us similar results. I don't think it's going to be any different. So the light source is slightly different because I did this at night time, but you know, I put a model light up there, so it should give us a good representation in terms of shutter speed. So let's have a look at f6.3. We're getting good detail in the three boxes here. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's pretty good in the corner, and that's generally where these lenses do tend to be at the weakest point, in the corners. So let's have a look at f8. As you can see, I think we've got some more detail there. It's very slight, it's not a lot, but it is there nevertheless, because we can see a pattern formed around the number 1 as it was in the 90D. Don't think the resolution on the two different cameras is really playing a part in that. So let's have a look at f16, and as we can see, as I said in the previous assessment of the 90D, we can see diffraction is affecting the quality. I'm losing the crisscross pattern that it was in the other box f8, and less defined detail around the number 1. So again, diffraction is happening here. So let's just have a look at f22, where literally the pattern has completely been blown out, so you've lost complete detail in these boxes. So let's just go back to f6.3. As you can see there, we're getting some detail, but it's not perfect. So let's just have a look at f8. We have a slight improvement of detail in the corner there around number 1, and then at f16, the crisscross pattern that we could see. Let's just go back to f8 and I'll show you what I mean. Crisscross pattern is there. f16, it's gone. We're just getting a pattern going down, not across. And then let's have a look at f22, where it's blown that pattern completely out and it's not viewable. But just for you guys, let's just zoom out again. Sorry, for some reason it sort of zoomed in. Let's just move over to the circular pattern on all of these images, just so I can show you the difference between the various apertures. So that's f6.3. You can see the pattern is viewable but not well defined, and it just seems to be less defined. Let's have a look at f8. We are seeing more of the pattern at f8 there. Then we have a look at f16, where it's blurred out more, and then at f22 the pattern is not visible at all in these circles. So I would like to go and have a look in the center this time. So we'll just move into the center on all these images, just so you can see for yourself. So f6.3 is not that sharp because obviously these hairs on the circle are not well defined. At f8 they're a little bit more defined, and you can see things seem to be more in focus at f8. Then at f16 we have some blurriness, and then at f22 it seems to be just as bad, if not worse. Very similar. So I just wanted to show you obviously how diffraction is affecting APS-C on this full frame lens. So as a contrast and something to compare to, let's have a look at full frame and see how that appears. Hello everyone, welcome back. We're on the EOS R full frame mirrorless camera with a 30 megapixel sensor. This is full frame, and we're going to compare this to the previous videos that I've just done on APS-C and how they differ from each other. What you'll find is on full frame you get more detail when it comes to depth of field. So the perfect way of finding out how much detail you get is looking at a test chart here. So this is at f6.3. Now I'm just going to zoom straight away into the corner at 200% here. Let's do the same at f8. So let's just get to 200% just quickly. I don't want to bore you too much and just show you the differences. This is at f16. Again 200%. We're looking at the far corner, so we can find out how sharp the lens is as well at the same time. But I want to see how much sensor detail, how much the sensor can capture in terms of depth of field, as well as is diffraction affecting our image quality at apertures that are at similar apertures that we had on the APS-C. So this is 6.3. It's not super sharp, but there is a little bit of softness there at 6.3, but it's pretty good. Let's have a look at f8. f8, we're rendering more detail. Looks well rendered. As you can see, the box over here, we're still seeing that crisscross pattern. No problems there. Let's have a look at f16. Now this is where it falls apart on APS-C. So let's have a look on full frame. And I can see an increased amount of detail. It looks reasonably good, no major problems there. And let's have a look at f22. While I see a little bit of softness there, you can still make out that pattern, because at this point at f22 APS-C was not able to give me any sort of detail of this pattern in the corner at all. So what we're determining here is diffraction definitely does affect APS-C more so than full frame for definite. So let's just have a look again for those doubters of you out there. So 6.3 there in the corner on full frame. It's a full frame lens, the Sigma 150 to 600. Same lens, same distance that we were away. Obviously I've similar lighting conditions to the 90D, and you know, you clearly can see it's a little bit soft there at 6.3 on full frame. Let's have a look at f8. We've got increased detail. Looks nice. You can see lots of detail in that pattern. Let's have a look at f16. We can see a slight increasement of pattern detail. So it's doing well. And then at f22, I think it gets a little bit softer, but we can still see good detail there. And at this point, the APS-C cameras just lost it completely. But nevertheless, let's have a look at more of the test chart so you guys can judge for yourself rather than listen to me ramble on. So let's just move on a bit further towards the center, and we'll be able to see detail in the circular pattern here. So let's have a look at how 6.3 is doing. There's a little bit of softness there, I will admit that. Stop it down to F8 and detail is recovered and looks nice. F16, it's definitely a lot better. You can see the actual grain in the paper there, in the pattern, so, you know, because it's white. So we've got increased detail at F16. Let's see how F22 does. It seems a bit softer than it was at F16, but it still is rendering the detail. And this is where APSC lost it completely. So let's have a look in the center this time. So I mentioned in the previous videos that obviously this is the center. Obviously you can see some hairs on there. So let's just have a look. I think it's just dust particles more so than hairs a bit. Nevertheless, we just want to have a look at detail. So let's have a look at 6.3. Obviously it's a bit softer, but it looks alright for me. No major problems there. F8, some slight detail improvement. You can certainly see that there. Let's have a look at F16. It seems pretty much the same to me. No major improvement, to be honest with you. But it looks okay. You know, there may be some improvement there. You can make your own mind up, but it looks okay. And F22. I think we've lost a bit of detail at F22. We've got a little bit of diffraction coming in, but not much. So, from this example, hopefully I've shown you that APSC does get diffraction coming into the image and affecting your image far quicker than it does on full frame. So obviously we're getting distortion from diffraction, which is affecting our image quality. Now you won't necessarily see this in the field. Only on test charts can you really see this developing. So I hope this video was educational and helpful. Thank you for watching, and you know, subscribe to the channel, like the video if it helped you out and understand the effects of diffraction. But hopefully in this video I've proved to you that APS-C cameras are more susceptible to diffraction than full frame cameras are. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, and I'd like to see you in the next video. Thank you.